In 1999, I was 22 and I just graduated from Emerson University in downtown Boston, majoring in screenwriting, specifically in cartoons and children's programming. My dip was pretty bad, so when Nickelodeon Studios offered me an internship at the studio in California, I accepted immediately and jumped to the chance to get away from the dead end job at Benjamin Franklin Tour Guide. Many of you should ask about Crybaby Lane, but if you want to see the original of Crybaby Lane, you never will. Even if Nickelodeon somehow consists of releasing it to you, you won't be seeing that what was shown on TV. And you sure as hell won't be seeing the original that Lure made. Now, I don't even think Nickelodeon has the original cut of the movie anymore, and if they do, it's only backed up in copies, and if the backup copies exist, they must be locked away in some vault, along with the other deleted episodes of Ren and Stimpy, and the never-before mentions of SpongeBob SquarePants. I am pretty sure the director, Peter Lorre, has the original copy, and is probably on his mantle next to his snuff films that are creepy as hell. Anyway, I was hired in 1999 and I immediately was put onto the creative production team for the movie Crybaby Lane, as it has been almost a year since the movie was due to be broadcast. Even in all that, it was still a pretty low effort and kind of a thing. We were only the 4 people in the creative team, and I was the only who studied one. Laura then would replace them with him, and he said to keep it fresh. I thought it was this because he was hiding something, and I was right. We had a little over a year to make the first TV movie, but not just to write it and cast it, but the film, but it has also got edited. Laura didn't work on fast at all. After the first 3 weeks, it had only been the ideas for the first 15 minutes of the 85 minutes of the movie. Laura then at this point was a weirdo. He was all tall and lanky and he carried himself awkwardly. He stuttered when he talked sometimes, and when you hunched over like a piece of paper during those endless brainstorming sessions, you looked up at catching him staring at you, smiling. He looked away when you caught his eye, and I guess that was the creepiest part, as he looked like he had been something to hide. Brainstorm sessions, at first they were alright. We got the premises down at the path of the 2 brothers unleash a demon, and when they try to get to mischief into getting everything back to normal. Not exactly daytime enemy stuff, but you know, I was right. I thought this movie should be goofy and spooky, like the Courage the Cowardly Dog sort of deal. However, from the very beginning, Lauren then made it clear that the film needed to be as scary as possible. He didn't want it to have cheap thrills with some good, wholesome ending. He just wanted to push it forward than Are You Afraid of the Dark ever dreamed of, and I guess he did. It was about 3 weeks into the production when I first noticed something. Lure had absolute power of the persuasion over everyone else in the creative production team. No one ever fought him by the 3rd week, and he was already suggesting morbid things. Now, I remember he said he wanted the little brother to die halfway through the movie, getting hit by a dump truck. I immediately shot it down. I was the only one who said anything, and stayed that way until I left the studio entirely, and I never came back. At first, there was other messed up stuff that I couldn't even mention, but I kept those jokes and tasteless comments up as by the time that things went on, it became more and more overt that I gave him the idea, which is most of the time he would end up using, like, how about the movie starts over the morbid undertaker who reads some stories? To which he replied, yeah, and then he can cut them up into little pieces and force him to feed his dog. They made those jokes in times in the early stages. Then it got serious. His stand-up was like Jesus or something, and cleared his throat loudly and proclaimed ideas. I'd be the only one to shoot it down. Every time. One day at the end of the brainstorming sessions, Lure then cleared his throat and stood up. We all fell silent and looked up at him, like we normally would, as he stood up and said, Gentlemen and females, I have an idea. I remember what he said. He paused and looked right at me and said, The story will revolve around a legend of a pair of Siamese twins. Have you ever heard of the Donner Party? Everyone nodded except me. I didn't like hearing where the conversation was going. They all died when they got cold, and it was messed up. Everyone then nodded again as I closed my eyes. What would Siamese twins do if they had nothing to eat? Would one wait until the other one dies and Well, you get the idea. Yeah, would they claw at each other's eyes until one of them died or something, like a vulture tearing their skin like of a dead deer? I do not know. It was interesting indeed. I didn't know what the hell I was hearing. I opened my eyes and looked around the room. No one was moving. Everyone's eyes were on Lure except for mine. When I looked up at him, he kept staring at me. Children like violence and they reveal it. Children like to be scared, so we'll scare them. Don't we, Johnny? He leaned over the table and was getting pretty damn close to my face. His breath smelled like decaying flesh. I honestly stared back at him. I think you're messed up, to be honest. He smiled and backed away. Oh, I'm messed up? Right. But you have to be more messed up to survive in this cutthroat world. His then grin expanded. Literally right now, I am going to show you some pictures that will spark up some of your imaginations. He then got up and locked the door from the inside. I then stood up and said, "What the hell are you doing?" "It's not like make any errors, judgments, Jonathan. Sit down." "No, sit." For some reason I did. Laura then pulled out one of those overhead projectors and then turned on the switch as he spoke aloud, the unusual high and semi-frantic voice. "This is so insane. We need to continue this production. This is what every child should see." His eyes bulged in his head. He put the image down on the glass surface of the overhead. It was silent. The image was in black and white, but it was grainy, and I could vaguely make out of a boy lying on a brick floor with his bloody and little numb black dots. The only thing was clear was his face. He was bleeding from the mouth. Laura then almost threw the paper over the head and slammed it into another one. It was zoomed in close on the shot of the boy's face. It was in color. The blood trickled from the mouth open onto the brick floor. His eyes were shut, grimy blood underneath his eyebrows and eyelashes. Then his eyes opened and I screamed. No one else in the room did, and it died frantically, and shrillness ringing in the air. The pupils were completely black, while the rest were all normal. The longer I stared, the more the eyes opened, widening and widening until it looked like the skin above his eyebrows and sockets were going to rip in half. Then they started to bleed. Blood started to trickle. I swear to God I could hear it. Now more than like ever full-blown stream. More and more until the brick on the floor was a lake of blood. I could hear it. I could hear that I was hiking and came across a stream and now I could smell a kid. I could smell his rot. I then leaned underneath the table and got back up. The images were gone except for everyone else in the room expressionless. Laura then turned on the lights. "You may go," he said, unlocking the door. I walked through those doors and I never came back. This happened near the end of the brainstorming process, and at the time, I left the casting was done and the script was almost fully written. They were so desperately behind schedule. I think Lure planned it to be that way so then it wouldn't have time for a proper ending or editing. I never watched the real thing when it aired, but I could hear from a friend that it was editing at the department, and they had cut at least a good 15-20 minutes off the disturbing footage from before it was fit to release. And it was the only time to be released. They didn't have time enough to check the footage by frame. I guess he got his wish. Unless they cut every single scene and the pictures in them, every child watching Crybaby Lane has an unconscious memory of those pictures. I weep for them, and I really do. They're messed up. And I write this to you. This will be the last thing I'll ever write before I take my own life, before blood splatters all over this computer screen. There is something I should tell you first, though. Early on, Laura posted the idea of two brothers capturing a squirrel, putting it in a squirrel in a jar, and slowly drowning it before filling the jar, and then the sand, and then put it at the bottom of the pond. Soon after that it was suggested, Sandy from SpongeBob SquarePants appeared and tea at the Tree Dome. Lure then also suggested in one of the movies that a good squid-like nose was to take off his pants in front of the two boys and do something really messed up off camera, but heavily implied Squidward soon appeared as a major character in SpongeBob SquarePants. It was also suggested to be the two stepbrothers forced to live in the same house after one mom was found dead in the shallow grave, her body heavily decomposed and killed by her own husband and a local weatherman. a show with vaguely premises Drake and Josh started in 2004, and the stepfather was indeed the weatherman. Lure also suggests the younger brother should have a doghouse in which keeps various animal moles, moles encased inside, rather than having to be mistreated by his stepfather, as told by Ginger at debut did soon after. A man captures the souls of children in a vacuum cleaner and sends them to Hades. Danny found them. A robot then goes insane like the two brothers and kills one of them wearing his skin, pretending to be the dead brother in high school, right? My life as a teenage robot. As the list goes on, Nickelodeon knows and that they continue the legacy of Lure, sometimes subtly and sometimes overtly, and there's nothing you can do about it. Do you want to see it? You got it. And that, my little pretties, was Cry Baby Lane, a lost Nickelodeon creepypasta. My final thoughts on this story? I actually found this one to be a pretty good pasta. Like, I haven't read this story in like a really long time, but I'm definitely going to sit here and say this, that this actually, really has a pretty good pasta for how the concept goes. I love how it seems not that. I love how this story seems to be, not written by the kid who thinks swearing makes sometimes things more mature, but also features an actual person with a real resume portrayed indeed as a horrible, monster with man obsessed with, messed up stuff and demonic powers. And yeah, I definitely would have to say, there's a lot of references in this story. Now, I actually heard and seen a few reviews saying that, oh, this story sucks because of this, because of that. Well, I actually still find this one to be a pretty good pasta for what this is. Now, I really would have to say it's, not a bad pasta, but this is actually a pretty good for what this is. Now, I think this was written back in 2011 or 2012. I'm not entirely sure. But I remember hearing this narration from Shadow Reader on his channel, and I think it was on his old channel too. And I also remember another movie. I remember this one was released. Well, like I remember the pasta was first released by Satan's Guard. It's he was a creepypasta narrator. I don't know if he's really active in a while because I haven't seen him in like a while, but I kind of remember. I think maybe I kind of remember him, sitting there and narrated certain stories. But you know, to be honest, I haven't read this pasta in a while, so this is kind of why I decided to sit there and read this one because it's not a bad story. I'm not gonna lie. I actually found this one to have a really good concept for what this is. But I would have to say that this story does need a little bit of work. Like, I mean, there was, some references that weren't really that necessary to begin with in the story. Like, that's just one of the things I would have to say is that the ending, like the references, I wasn't really a major fan of the references that were in the story. Like references of SpongeBob and, some TV shows by Nickelodeon, such as Nickelodeon stuff like My Life as a Teenage Robot, Danny Phantom, and yeah, and a lot of other shows that were mentioned, like SpongeBob and all that. Like, I mean, I haven't watched the original Crybaby Lane movie in like a really long time, so that's kind of one of the reasons why I haven't really, pay attention to this story. But yeah, everything that the director said that he wanted to add, really messed up subject matters that I could not say them for obvious reasons. But yeah, if you want to read the story for yourself, to read the parts I did not specifically say for obvious reasons, it's on the regular Creepypasta Wiki. You can watch that, you could read that on the Creepypasta Wiki because that's where I got the story from. But yeah, overall, I think those subject matters that were in the story were just there for shock. I really don't know exactly, to be 100% honest, but Yeah, I'm definitely have to say it's not a bad story, but it does need a little bit of, but it does need work. That's actually one of the biggest reasons why I really don't like how this story went out. I really don't like this story. Well, that's what a lot of people say. I don't like this story. Like I don't like I'm not saying I don't like the story. I'm just saying that I forgot to mention that earlier that a lot of people really say I don't like this story because of this. But the only thing I may negative I have to say about the story was the references that were used to other shows. Like I get it, it's an older story, so I'm kind of willing to give that a pass. But yeah, that was the only thing why I didn't like about the story. The story was not terrible per se. It's not terrible, but it does need some work at times. But the grammar was really good in this story, along with the sentence structuring. So I'm willing to give it that. But other than that, the story just needs a little bit of work. But it's not bad or anything. It just needs some work. Now, anyways, with that being the case, that being said, I can't find the original author's name. So to the author, if for some reason you wrote the story, if for some reason I do find you, like if you comment on this video and tell me you wrote the story, I'll be sure to give you proper credit. So until then, I will leave it as anonymous for now. When I find out who the original author is, I'll be sure to give him or her proper credit for this story. So, anyways, with that being the case, that being said, like I'm gonna say right now, and like I always continue to say, it's just simply my own personal opinion, and if you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be a... What should I say? Oh yeah. My final rating of this story would have to be a 9 out of 10. I'm giving it a 9 because it has a pretty good concept for what it is. Messed up one, in fact. But the subject matters that were involved into the story, and even though some messed up things that were not really necessary that needed to be in there, and the references to certain, Nickelodeon shows and that needs to be taken out. But other than that, the story was not a terrible one, but it does need a little work on those. But I'm sure the author has going out of his or her way and write better stories and good ones at that fact. But this one was pretty good for what it is. Now, anyways, with that being the case, that being said, what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what you have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section down below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you happen to be brand new here on this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload, so that way you guys won't miss an upload. As always, please roll the outro because I'm